Thanks, Jonathan. I'm going to address Jonathan's three questions that are incredibly difficult. One of them, the very first question is, what is the state of the economy? In our very first session when we were at the roundtables, we were asked, why you're here. And we asked Jonathan, well, why are you here? He goes, well, for 10 years I've been pondering what is the state of our environment. And then 2 days ago, we got the question to answer, what is the state of our environment? So we have a little bit shorter time frame to answer this than Jonathan does. But anyway, we're very excited to be here and talk about it. Before I go into the questions, I want to talk about a little bit about the Chamber of Commerce ourselves. The Chamber, if you look at our brand promise, and if you look at the back of my business card, it says three things. It says our name, Jackson Hole Chamber of Commerce. It says our brand promise and a tagline, respecting the power of place. And then below it, it says our commitment to the triple bottom line, the exact same one that's on your table that the comp plan had that we developed in 2012. We've had this on the back of our business card since 2004, and it's something that we take very seriously. The Chamber of Commerce and business in this community doesn't exist with what we see does not exist without what we see outside these windows. It's there's a very clear connection to the business community that not only tourism, and Chauncey kind of referenced this before, but whether it's people wanting to relocate here for lifestyle choices that turn into workforce, whether it's knowledge-based businesses that are emerging, that people select this community for a very intentional reason, and it is because of lifestyle. And I think where you would find a typical Chamber of Commerce, and I'll use as an example, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce came out in favor of the Keystone Pipeline, whereas our Chamber of Commerce came out opposed to drilling in the Hoback. And I think that you probably see an example after example of that, hopefully, in how we behave and the actions that we take. As far as the question, what is the state of our environment? It's good. That's my official scientific response to that. But really, I think it leads to the next two questions, which I think are the things that Jonathan's really driving at. And the next one is, how do we know? He does get a little more complicated on the how do we know part in the second half of the question. I'll get to that in a second. But when it comes to the Chamber, it's the company that we keep. And it's who we surround ourselves with. Whenever, and I'll just kind of go through a few examples. We hold mixers for public outreach to other businesses, for networking opportunities for businesses to get to know businesses. 2 weeks ago, Phil Cameron and Energy Conservation Works was one of our speakers, so that we can A, educate ourselves about things that are going on inside the community, but also B, help spread that message to our members as well. Business over breakfasts, we hold varying topics. A huge chunk of our, I'm looking at Mac Dukart, he's presented at one of our business over breakfasts with with the Triple R program, and we are proud to be a member of that as well. So it's keeping those type of educational programs kind of front and center to make sure that we're educating not only ourselves, but also the business community in general. We're the founder of Green Drinks. 6 of our sponsors are direct environmental organizations that help with that. We have our programming, again, is intended to help us understand impacts, but also to help our businesses understand the impacts and the choices that they make. Partnerships. Just today, scheduled a meeting with the Conservation Alliance, should have snuck out here, I believe, to discuss the grizzly bear potential delisting. We don't have a staff, a team that does measurement, that really looks at, that goes out and takes soil samples. That's not who we are. We don't have a budget for that. We don't know where to start. So it's surrounding our people with the right organizations. We partner with the Riverwind Foundation. My predecessor at the Chamber, Tim O'Donohue, one of our staff members is on his board. They're doing, right now, working on cataloging all of the environmental efforts in the entire community so that we have a better understanding of that. And it's really making sure that we have these partnerships aligned. But finally, and I think this is significant, if you come to one of our board of directors meetings, we have 17 board of director members, and then we have 6 ex officios. And our ex officios that come to every single meeting 4 of those 6 ex officios are the managers of 97% of the land around here. We have Yellowstone as an ex officio on our board, Grand Teton, the National Elk Refuge and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Bridger Teton National Forest, all represented at every single one of our meetings while we're setting vision and direction for the Chamber of Commerce. We take it incredibly seriously. The second part of the question, oh, and I did want to address while I was here that, well, I'll just go directly to the second part of the question. Jonathan then asked more precisely, what do we actually know? And that's where it gets a lot foggier, because just because we're surrounding ourselves with, we feel like the right organizations, it doesn't mean we necessarily have a dashboard or some way of communicating with each other what the state of our environment is. It's not like I get a call in the morning and say, hey, the environment today is a 4.7, and we all give a thumbs up and move on. You know, I wish it was that simple, but that's just not where we are. The final question was related to the comp plan. You know, how do we balance? How do we preserve and protect the area's ecosystem in order to ensure a healthy environment, community, and economy for current and future generations to come? You know, and I wanted to kind of ping off of a couple things I heard this morning before getting directly into it, and I'll start with tourism. Jonathan showed a graph that showed the increase in population in Teton County versus what's going on in the country. And, you know, and I think that another thing to really consider is imagining what is that graph going to do in the next 80 years, not just in the 80 years that were behind us. One thing that we know about the prior 80 years, when we look at our economy, that most of the jobs, most of the reasons that people were able to move here, it was they were either retired and financially set enough to be able to afford Jackson, or they had to come to a job where you lived, where you served the customer that you were facing every day. And we still had that growth. And that has changed in the last 10 years. We saw some knowledge-based business growth 20 years ago, 25 years ago. But in the next 80 years, what is that going to look like? And I've heard some people talk about how they think that maybe the growth in knowledge-based businesses will be a replacement for some of the traditional. I would argue I'm not convinced of that. I would say that I think that they might grow concurrently, and that we need to be very thoughtful about what that graph may or could look like. So I just wanted to throw that out there before I move into, you know, I'm not going to get into drivers that I've had in my notes to talk about, you know, drivers of tourism. I don't want to go too far into it, but I do want to say that tourism in the United States is only about 3.5 generations old. There wasn't any meaningful mass destination tourism that existed before the 1940s and 1950s. It was a luxury for the very wealthy. Until the emergence of the middle class after the Depression and the development of the interstate highway system, it was very, very small. And so if we rewound back to 1940, 1950, whenever tourism was just kicking off, we didn't imagine that emerging economies or developing economies or third world economies would maybe in just 3.5 short generations away start to develop such that they're going to travel as well. So in the next 3.5 generations, what's going to happen to India? What's going to happen to Brazil? What's going to happen to Russia? I mean, there are some massive, massive population bases out there that are learning exactly what we learned about their countries. When you think of China, you think of probably 3 or 4 things: Shanghai, Beijing, maybe the Great Wall of China, maybe a couple of other things. When people are thinking about us in those countries, they know 3 or 4 things too, and I guarantee you Yellowstone is one of them. So I think that we need to kind of make sure that we're thinking in that, you know, what's coming down in the next 3.5 generations of tourism growth. As far as how to, you know, what do we do? You know, how do we hope to realize this comp vision plan? You know, we had the scientists, the people that were speaking to us this morning. It's this idea of, is there like a common language that we can all agree on? What are the metrics that we should track? How do we communicate that collectively when we have very different missions in what we do for a living? And how can we then, once we determine what those are, set policy and set action that will help guarantee we get our goals? So thanks for your time.